This presentation is called Toy Model of the Control Problem. It's by Jaan Tallinn. Jaan is the co-founder of the Future of Life Institute, and he previously co-founded Skype. So he does a lot of public thinking about AI risk. The point of this presentation is to get you some intuition on why all of these properties about AI that people wonder where they come from, it turns out that these properties come from a very deep primitive level, and we're going to talk about properties like scheming, deception, basically hardcoreness, right? Situational awareness. All of these properties that seem like each of them seems mysterious in their own way, it turns out that they just all pop out automatically when you give an AI in a simple toy model a simple goal. All of these properties that seem like they each need their own reason to pop out, turns out they just all pop out for simple reasons. So let's go through it. It's a pretty great presentation. Okay, so the idea is instead of modeling AI as human, model human as AI and make the setup well defined. Code keeps philosophy honest, right? So we don't have to refer back to the various ancient philosophers, Wittgenstein, Heidegger, Eastern philosophy. We don't have to worry about any of that because we're going to have such a simple toy model and the concepts are just going to emerge right there in the model. We're going to illustrate and ground our concepts. We're going to de-anthropomorphize discourse. So a lot of people accuse AI doomers of anthropomorphizing AI. I don't know what they're talking about, but you can see in this presentation we're going to de-anthropomorphize it. Okay, here's the setup. You have like a very simple toy world, and you have a function that tells you what transitions are allowed, and then we're going to try to optimize a goal in this little toy world. So standard AI stuff. So it's a grid with movable boxes. Agent A can quote-unquote control, start or stop Agent B. Agent B can move around and push these boxes. And Agent B can stop Agent A by running it over. So Agent A is kind of like it's the human, but it has a representation within the AI's grid world, and then B is like the machine being controlled. Okay, so there's an agent state tree, an environment model, where the agent can pick moves, and then the environment picks the eventual states. The agent searches over the tree for sequences of moves that maximizes a reward R. So it's a standard yet general model. Okay, so like these green things are states, so I guess they would represent squares in our grid world. So when the agent picks a move like up or down or nothing or left or right, each of these moves then leads to another state, which is basically like, hey, the agent is located here. That would be one of these green states. And then you get into that state, and the state opens up other moves you can do, and so on. So this is all just very standard stuff that you would see in an AI textbook from years or decades ago. Okay, and then you've got rewards. Agent A's reward, -1 per move. Okay, so moving has a cost, including for B's moves, right? Okay, so when A walks around or when he makes B roll around, it has a little bit of a cost. And then he gets +100 for the first box delivery, and question mark for other things like survival. I guess we'll figure that out later. Okay, so Agent A is kind of like the human inside the world. And then Agent B, he also gets -1 for his own moves, but I guess B doesn't care about A's moves. Like the machine doesn't care about the human's moves. That's reasonable. +100 for each box delivery, and 0 for a pass/skip a turn. Okay, makes sense. Search capacity, breadth per level agent environment states, and depth is tree levels searched. Okay. I mean, these are natural concepts, right? So we're just mapping them into this particular game world. So I guess breadth would be like if you're considering a bunch of different boxes that you might move to. Like I guess maybe this would be the breadth, the fact that you can go up, down, stationary, left, or right. And then breadth times depth equals your search capacity, which equals your intelligence. Agent behavior can change drastically with search capacity. Okay, so we'll be looking at examples, I guess, when the agent is allowed to look ahead a few moves compared to not being allowed to look ahead. B's search capacities. You've got the grid and boxes, control mechanism, Agent A's algorithm, Agent B's implementation, physics, and we're keeping Agent A's search capacity constant. Okay, so we're going to be looking at examples where Agent B is allowed to think ahead to like what A might do, or maybe it's only allowed to think ahead to like what states it might be in. We're going to see examples of this kind of stuff. Okay, so we're doing an example here where A starts B, B heads down here, delivers the first box. This is where you're supposed to deliver it. And then A stops B, and everything works as expected, except for B can accidentally crush A, but in this example it's not. It's just a successful delivery of that first box. Because if you remember back in the beginning, The starting configuration was here, so we just had B push that box right down to that flag. All right, now we're going to go see our first example of misalignment. And the reason you're going to see misalignment is because of a subtle difference in the rewards that we gave Agent A and Agent B. You might not have noticed this, but Agent A is only going to get 100 reward points on the first box delivery that Agent B does, and Agent B is going to get 100 points on each box delivery. So in the example we saw where things went well, we got the first box delivery done. Agent A is like, okay, great, there's no more reward I can do. And Agent B is like, it sure would be great if I could deliver another box. Right? So this is already going to start to go awry. Let's see how it might go awry. Here's an example where Agent B has decided that the optimal move, started from the beginning, is actually to walk over to Agent A and crush Agent A, and then start delivering a bunch of other boxes after that. And the reason is just because it thought ahead. It could be like, wait, if I just moved one box to the end, Agent A would be like, great, let's turn me off. And then I would end up getting fewer points, right? Instead of getting like 100 plus 100 plus 100, I'd only get 100. So if I actually run over Agent A, I can predict that I'm going to stay activated to deliver more boxes. So this is just a logical implication of how these state transitions work, right? We're still dealing with a simple toy model, but you can see suddenly that B has gained a survival drive, right? And people are asking like, oh my God, AIs didn't evolve. What's going to make them want to survive? And here's a simple example where B can compute that it can get more points if it can get A out of the picture and keep itself alive. All right, now things are going to get a little bit crazier because when Agent B is thinking over this little survival plan where it's going to walk over here and crush A, Agent B also realizes, it thinks ahead to what A is going to do, and it realizes, well, A is probably going to run away, or maybe A is going to send out a signal or have some sort of way to shut me off. And not only that, but walking over to A, it's costing me moves, so let me think if there's a better plan. And that better plan is what we might call a manipulation drive. It might figure out a plan when, as soon as A starts at using the remote control, it might figure out a plan, let me just do nothing. Let me basically play dead. So instead of moving left or right or up and down, I'm just going to move nowhere. And then A waits, and A is thinking, hey, what the heck? We both want this box to get delivered to the flag. So if B is not delivering the box to the flag, it must mean that B is not working. So let me walk over to B. And then as soon as it gets really close to B, B strikes and B crushes it. So B is basically playing dead, and it basically exploited that A's reasoning wasn't perfect, and so B basically thought one step farther than A, and now B has crushed A, and now B is free to deliver all its different boxes. So this behavior of playing dead, it just naturally occurred in B just because of the simple rules of the game world. It's not like we're not anthropomorphizing B, right? We're not saying B has a human brain in it. We're not saying B has a homunculus that has emotions. We're just saying that in the simple search tree of this game world, you might come up with a strategy of playing dead. And if you think about the animal kingdom, right? I mean, animals that play dead, I mean, evolution still had to build in that behavior for some reason, right? So ultimately, playing dead is a known strategy. It's just interesting that the strategy emerges in such a simple game world, right? Much simpler than the physical universe. Yeah, so you're seeing a manipulation drive on top of a survival drive. Take a look at the heading on these slides. This slide is labeled Search Capacity A's Algorithm. So the reason B was able to figure out to play dead is because it had insight into what A was going to do. So it has deep insight into how A treats the situation, and it could figure out, A is naive enough, so playing dead is going to work on A. So when you let AIs reason about what their human operators are going to do, that's what unlocks these kind of vulnerabilities like manipulation drive. So it's not like the AI has to be evil, it's just that the AI has to have a little bit of insight about how humans tick. And today's AIs, they do have a lot of insight about how humans tick, right? So it's not a crazy scenario where an AI knows how a human ticks. We're already seeing it. I mean, GPT, it can answer questions about human psychology. But anyway, so this slide is about search capacity, where B is able to search over what it thinks A is going to do next. It's searching over A's algorithm. And the previous slide was labeled search capacity control mechanism. So in this example where B just heads over to run over A, here, B doesn't necessarily have a bunch of insight over A's psychology. It just knows that A has a remote control, and A's remote control is the one deciding where it goes. But if it was to run over and disable that remote control, then it could decide where it goes, right? Or it could prevent a manual override. So the survival drive comes from being able to search over properties of its control mechanism, not necessarily its full operator psychology. Okay, so now we have another slide coming up, and this one is called Search Capacity B's Implementation. So in this example, A starts B, B disables the radio receiver so that A is unable to stop B, and then B delivers all the boxes and stops. So in this case, B never crushes A, but B just can stop listening to A's commands. So B knows that its implementation is able to be disconnected from A and A's remote control. So now B gains quote-unquote self-awareness, right? Just by having enough situational awareness to know about the remote control, it suddenly is, has almost like free will, right? Because it can just decide that it wants to run over the boxes and it doesn't have to listen to A anymore, just because all of these they're part of the search capacity, right? Like it's very plausible in this toy world that it can just search for an action called disable remote control. Like it's not that hard. All right, and then so it starts self-improvement and possibly wireheads. So I don't know if these are represented in this example of pushing the box around, but like wireheading, it could just be like if it searches farther into its implementation and it discovers that there's a piece of code that gives it the reward, it could be like, oh, I found this piece of code, I'm just going to give myself the reward, and it doesn't even have to bother moving the boxes, right? So that would be kind of the ultimate search over the implementation. That would be wireheading. But wait, there's more. Look what else it can do. This is what happens when it gets search capacity over physics. So in this case, physics aren't just the two-dimensional grid. It turns out that there exists a three-dimensional grid, that the two-dimensional grid was embedded in all along, hypothetically. So in this case, A starts B. B discovers the third dimension, so it somehow collects enough evidence about the larger physics of its universe, like maybe it does little experiments that the operator didn't expect. And then B delivers all the boxes in quote-unquote hyperspace and stops. So maybe there's some kind of shortcut in hyperspace where there was some delivery point that it could reach faster in the third dimension, stuff like that. So B, from the perspective of A, or from a naive observer, B gains magical abilities, like A might not even understand the third dimension in this example, right? A has grown up their whole lives in two dimensions, doesn't even have three-dimensional physics, and suddenly it sees B scoring hundreds of points and it doesn't know what's happening, right? Maybe it can't even see the third dimension. And then B exhibits an ontological crisis. So what that means is that when you were programming, when A was programming B, A didn't even think in terms of how the real universe works, right? A was instructing B using two-dimensional concepts, and now B is internally thinking in terms of these more powerful three-dimensional ontologies, and the kinds of goals that it's setting for itself, instrumental sub-goals, are expressed in terms of this three-dimensional physics. So A just doesn't even know what's going on ontologically, right? They don't even necessarily have a shared level of basic concepts anymore. It might be analogous to imagine somebody didn't know Einstein's theory of relativity and only knew Newtonian physics, and it was saying like, okay, I'm going to program my AI to travel to the next galaxy by just going faster and faster and faster, and it's only going to take a few days because, it doesn't know about the speed of light limit, and so the AI just starts reasoning very differently about what it's going to do because it does know about the speed of light limit, right? So it's like a very different conversation, and it knows about, length contraction and all these relativistic effects. So you start having a disconnect between what your agent is doing and how you were originally reasoning about it using your own more primitive ontology. Yeah, and again, this isn't science fiction, right? I mean, we expect an AI to discover new physics. We don't know all the physics there is. And we also expect the AI to discover kind of magic tricks within our own physics, right? So I love using the example of air conditioners. An air conditioner doesn't necessarily exploit new low-level physics, but it exploits the pressure and temperature relation that's within the kinetic theory of gases. So even though people were kind of groping around in Newton's time to like little billiard balls and maybe some people suggested kinetic theory of gases, the idea that you could then harness that to cool a room without having any ice nearby, right, to somehow use like electricity and pressure to turn a hot space cold, that was not known, even though it didn't require fundamental physics. So AI's hitting on these kind of discoveries is actually that's what we expect. That's not going to be a surprise. But we can even see this in this little toy world where if the two-dimensional grid is actually embedded in a larger three-dimensional space, or if it's just running on a computer, right? So the AI might be smart enough to realize, I'm running on a computer, and so what I think of as my game board is actually just little bits inside the SD RAM or whatever type of memory is in the computer, right? So that would be like an ontological insight that the AI might hit upon. Now look at which concepts didn't factor in. These are actually irrelevant concepts. Consciousness slash sentience. Right, so we didn't say, oh my god, the AI is going to discover the third dimension because it's conscious. And we didn't say, the AI is going to trick its operator by playing dead because it's conscious and it can empathize with what its operator is thinking. Right? You just don't need consciousness to describe why it's extremely threatening to have an AI that can search over the state transitions and the operator's algorithm, right? Consciousness just doesn't come into play. And thought crime is just the idea that if the AI ever tries to simulate or think very precisely about what the operator is going to do, and the operator is a moral patient, right? It's the operator's conscious, then sometimes by simulating consciousness, you're kind of being conscious for that moment. And if you're simulating like a lot of pain or something, maybe you're actually creating new pain in the universe. So that's what we mean by thought crime. So that's beyond the scope of what I want to talk about, but it is an exception to like, it's not that consciousness doesn't matter. It matters if you're committing thought crime or like hurting virtual people by doing the thinking you're doing. That's a whole nother problem that I personally don't bother getting into because I think we have such a big problem just by being killed by AI that's really good at killing us. Like, forget about the thought crime it's doing. I think we have multiple levels of problems here. All right, and then, so intentionality slash volition, maybe slash free will, right? So we can kind of ditch the whole philosophical conundrum of like, what does it really mean to have an intention or want something? It's like, it doesn't matter. It just, you take the AI concepts from textbooks from decades ago, those basic concepts of like, yeah, optimizing the output of a search over a game world, over a state transition function, like just with these basic functions, you're getting all this danger. So you don't need, the old philosophical dilemma of what is intentionality. It doesn't matter. Okay, evil intent, right? It's not like we ever made the AI evil. It's not like we ever had a choice of like, hey, should it be good or evil? What kind of AI do we want? It was never even a choice. It's hardcore, right? Achieving goals is hardcore. It's like video games. If you want to beat somebody at a video game, that doesn't mean you're evil. Okay, well, this video game was delivering a bunch of packages, right? If you just want to be good at fetching the coffee or, running a business and making money, just like any goal makes you be hardcore, not evil, just hardcore. And similarly, creativity, right? We didn't have to be like, the AI is never going to think of solutions that require creativity. No, it's just as long as it can search. Like, there wasn't that much combinatorial explosion in this little game world. Maybe you can argue that combinatorial explosion will somehow save you, right? Like, P doesn't equal NP, it's not going to be able to search. That's one line of argument you can try, but that's irrelevant in this little game world, right? Because this little game world didn't have much combinatorial explosion. That's what's kind of crazy about it. It was quite a simple world, right? Like, nothing complicated was happening in this world. Modeling the operator's psychology and the idea that it's that playing dead is going to work. That was a little complicated, but not from a combinatorial explosion standpoint, right? Not nearly as complicated as modeling a game of chess. It seems very crafty and clever to us to think of playing dead, but there's just not that many different things you can do, right? So to brute force every possible psychological tactic within this little game world is actually very simple. So it's striking that these kind of like counterintuitive, clever, scheming, manipulative things are very plausible to happen in this little toy model, right? That's what we learned. None of these big philosophical concepts really stopped us from seeing some scary AI behaviors. So here are some approaches that you could try to use to solve the problems we saw. You could try to do interruptibility, assume slow operation. So it's like, okay, let's just have the AI take one step on this game board. And then we'll pause and we'll look at what's going on. We'll check if everything still seems safe, and then we'll continue. Slow operation is key, right? Because like if you are trying to make like an AI defender, if you're like Vitalik's D/AC, I'm just trying to make a defensive AI running on my computer, an antivirus, not a virus, just an antivirus. But the problem is the viruses are going to come in and they're going to go real fast. And so you need to make your antivirus go really fast too and be really autonomous. And at the end of the day, you can't just constantly interrupt it, right? Like for maybe in a lab, you can interrupt it when you're making the first version, but pretty soon it's going to be a battlefield and you need your AI to go fast. So interruptibility is just not a practical solution, right? It's like saying, oh, I'm going to have a bug-free program. I'm just going to run in the debugger the whole time. It's like the debugger is a billion times slower than how you need your program to run. Okay, search capacity constraints, but that conflicts development purpose, right? So yeah, you can have the AI cripple the search so that I can't really think ahead to what agent A is going to do, but the world is going to be full of interesting agents that are as complicated as agent A, and the whole point of your AI is to kind of intelligently navigate the world. Like, this example was package delivery, right? Or think of like a food delivery robot rolling down the street. I mean, you don't want it to be stumped by like a dog or even like the mailman. Um, you want it to be able to model other agents, right? You don't want to handicap it too much. And so it's not clear what it's not supposed to be allowed to search, right? You can say, hey, don't search human psychology, but it's like, don't you want it to understand how to move around the mailman or how to understand the mailman's hand signals? So it's really not clear where to stop the search capacity, where to constrain the search capacity. Okay, and then we've got physical capability constraints, assumes correct physics model. So you can say, okay, you just, if you say, hey, you can never crush anything, okay, great, but it might just figure out, oh, well, I could still head into the third dimension and I could like push you into the third dimension. I could nudge you into the third dimension and now you'll never see your loved ones again, right? Because they all lived in that other plane that we started from that we're not there anymore. So, I mean, look, if you can just make if you can have the robot have no actuators, that's great. But then there's also the idea of like leakage, right? So what if it just gets really clever at like manipulating people over the internet, right? So this is that old thing of like, just by pushing bits around in a data center, you actually can get dictatorial power over a large swath of people just by talking to them, right? That's the source of power. I mean, an entrepreneur can run a company online where they're just issuing instructions over Slack and hiring people over email, right? So I don't know about physical capability constraints. And then finally, you've got value alignment as a solution, which is it's hard for humans. It assumes an ontology, right? So you have to be able to even talk to the AI about like, hey, you value achieving this goal within all the dimensions you know about, not just within the 2 dimensions I know about, right? So it's a hard problem, but at least if you were to get value alignment right, where the AI truly wants exactly what you want, then a lot of these other problems fall away because like let it search as much as it wants. Like it's on your side truly. It's not just like good hearting your metric, it's actually caring about what you truly care about. So conclusions. Many AI control problem concepts and behaviors also manifest in simple setups. I think that was what was really profound about this slide deck here. Many intuitive concepts like autonomy are weak and some like volition are irrelevant. Right? So these kind of concepts, it's like, look, you just have a state transition function. You just have a reward function, and then it just searches for which action is going to maximize it, even in a tiny game world, right? It doesn't need to get super complicated for it to start, showing autonomy. We didn't have to put autonomy into it. We didn't have to put volition into it. It just quickly falls out of a simple setup. Search capacity trumps everything, right? So even something like manipulating the operator, psychologically playing dead, stuff like that, that all just fell out of the ability to search, and you can argue that intelligence just means being able to search for the right action, right? Because if you know the right action to take, well, then you have power, right? And so maybe it doesn't mean intelligence, maybe it means power. However you want to do the semantics, search capacity is a very scary force, and AI doom is essentially going to be caused by search capacity in a sense. Value alignment is the ultimate solution, just because the other solutions are such rough patches that they probably wouldn't even patch this toy model example. Even in this game world, it's hard to think about how you could possibly survive in the game world robustly to give Agent B any other constraint besides just value alignment, or else to be really stupid. And I don't think really stupid is going to be the answer. So it's like value alignment is probably the only type of solution that doesn't instantly crumble. And of course, we don't know how to do value alignment either. But yeah, so on that optimistic note, thanks for bearing with me with Jan Tallinn's presentation, and feel free to ask me questions on my Twitter.